everybody. We're going to get started. Thank you for coming. My name is Charlene Margot, for those of you who don't know me. This looks like a pretty familiar group we have here today. Thank you for coming out on this, the final of the Parent Education mini-series on safe and healthy teens. We are very excited about the presentation that we have for you today. Wonderful information, wonderful ladies to share with you stuff that parents really need to know about. As always, our program is about educating ourselves so that we can have better conversations with our children, be they tweens, teens, or younger. Our program is always based on the developmental needs of children, so we look at the social, emotional, mental, academic, and physical attributes of kids as they develop. Let us get started. Oh, let me just tell you a little bit about the format. So today we will have about an hour of content and about 30 minutes time at the end for Q&A. So if you feel free and you want to ask questions, that's great. Our presenters will restate the question because we do have Alan videotaping in the back. Thank you, Alan. So that at some point these videos will be available online to anyone who signed up and to the greater Sequoia Union High School District community. Okay? All right. One other little bookkeeping item. Hopefully you picked up or were handed one of our little mini-series surveys. This data helps us plan for next year and also gives us information that helps with grant funding for the Parent Education Series in this district and beyond. Okay, here we go. Crisis Text Line. Libby, this is Libby Craig, is the West Coast Director of Crisis Text Line, a national not-for-profit that provides 24/7 support by text and shares trends about its 38 million messages exchanged, crisistrends.org. Libby oversees partnerships growth and volunteer recruitment in the West Coast. She studied global health and previously worked in product management at PATH and MedHealth. Libby is also a Palo Alto native and a graduate of Gunn High School. Pamela Weiss. Hi, Pamela. Pamela is a volunteer crisis counselor with CTL and a member of its Bay Area Advisory Board. She is a Palo Alto resident of 20 years and parents 3 high schoolers, grades 9th, 11th, and 12th, with her husband, Scott Weiss. Pamela and Scott were the Parent Association co-presidents at Woodside Priory School in Portola Valley for the past 2 years. She holds a bachelor's degree in journalism and an MBA, and has worked in media, internet business development, and plenty of bake sales. Please join me in welcoming Libby and Pamela.
Thank you. So before we introduce ourselves further and talk about how we came to be with Crisis Text Line, we are going to show a little informational video to get you guys familiar with Crisis Text Line.
My name is Nancy Loveland, and I'm the founder and CEO of Crisis Text Line, and I'm a volunteer. We're not a suicide line, we're here for all of it. The reason that we're on text is that we want to be where you are, and we want to make it as easy as possible for people who are in pain to get help.
My name is Bob Philbin, and I am the Chief Data Scientist at Crisis Text Line. A little over 3 years, almost 29 million messages, over 1 million messages per month at this point, exchanged between our crisis counselors and our texters. That translates to well over 600,000 conversations. So each of these conversations is actually pretty rich, over 40 messages exchanged. We're reaching a traditionally underserved population. 75% of our texters are under the age of 25. Around 47% of our texters do not identify as straight or heterosexual. 5% of our texters identify as American Indian.
About 10% of our texters now are under age 13, which is mind-blowing to me because a lot of kids under 13 don't even have phones.
Some people, I think, assume that because it's texting, it's a lesser version of what would be on the phone, and that's not true.
65% of texters say that they've shared something with us they've never shared with another human.
Allowing people to express their thoughts and feelings with the blanket of anonymity is so important.
We're always working to improve that experience for our counselors to be able to take texters from a heated moment to a full poem.
Most customer service is chronological. That's, I think, what people assume that we do, but we don't. We put a few dozen words into the algorithm: die, overdose, suicide, and we range based on that. So if the algorithm read those words, we made those people number 1 in the queue, and we take them very, very quickly, and they're coded orange. We take people based on severity.
When a texter is at imminent risk and they also are unwilling to come up with a safety plan, that's when an active rescue is initiated, and that's when emergency services are called.
An active rescue is not our goal. Our goal is to actually de-escalate the situation so that we don't have to call 911. We brought in our first machine learning data scientist, and he looked at the 20 million messages back and forth and said, okay, what are the words that actually end up having to trigger that active rescue? Like, who really is imminent risk? And it turns out there are thousands of words and word combinations that are higher risk than even the words die, overdose, and suicide. Ibuprofen, aspirin, Tylenol, Advil, those words suggest that someone doesn't just have the ideation and the plan, but they have the means and they have the timing because it's right there in arm's reach. The other thing that's fascinating is the unhappy face crying emoji. Turns out to be 4 times more likely in us having to trigger an active rescue than the word suicide.
The purpose of our data is to serve our users, to serve people in crisis, but I think there's a whole second layer of impact. CrisisTrends.org is our open data for the public. Anybody can access it. It's available online right now.
One university wants to look at the words most often associated with child abuse, because child abuse is very underreported in America. If they can figure out what those words are, they can turn those words back out to pediatricians and principals, and you can help more kids.
Empathy is a really big word that we use. I think our company's focus is empathy. We see that trying to put yourself in the other person's shoes is so important.
Our crisis counselors are some of the greatest people I've ever met.
I actually found out about Crisis Text Line through a psychologist within the Muslim community. I'm really interested in the mental health sphere, and this was really innovative, how strangers are helping strangers, and they want to just be able to talk to somebody. They just want to get it off of their chest.
I had a texter whose best friend, she lost her best friend, and she mentioned how that person that she lost was always so happy and so jovial, and she just didn't know what to say around that family. And I said, why don't you be that? Imagine what they're feeling without that. So go and be with them and be that light, be that laughter. And she said, I didn't think of it that way.
Yesterday we did 18 active rescues. That's 18 families that today would have had a very different day. We're now doing an average of 10 active rescues a day. The more volunteers, the more capacity we have to help people. So we love our volunteers.
People that can straddle both this structured way of life, but also think bigger picture, do very well here.
Active listening is definitely one of those words I would say that we definitely use all through our training. But those are skills that aren't just particular to Crisis Text Line or volunteering as a crisis counselor. I think those are learning skills that you can take anywhere in the world.
Look, this is the largest mental health data set that's ever been collected, stored, and analyzed. It's another thing in the arsenal that we need to combat mental illness. There's so much more work to do.
All right, so hopefully that video is informational, and we're here to dive in a little bit deeper to what Crisis Text Line is, how we work, how our volunteers are trained, a little bit more about the data. And I think first we wanted to just introduce ourselves. Again, I'm Libby. I'm the West Coast Director of Crisis Text Line, and I'm also a local to this area. I grew up in Palo Alto. I attended Gunn High School, and in my last 2 months of high school, I lost 2 peers to suicide my senior year, and then I lost my cousin who was 17 who attended Bellarmine High School a couple years ago. And so I was working in tech in Silicon Valley, recent graduate of college, and was looking for a way to volunteer and get involved in this space because of growing up in that area, because of losing my cousin, felt really, really meaningful to me. And so when I found a hotline that was not only providing this intervention service, but also utilizing technology in a really exciting way. I knew that was what I wanted to get involved with as a volunteer first, a crisis counselor first. And then about 6 months after that, I joined full-time with Crisis Text Line. So they're based in New York. The headquarters is in New York, but we have a couple of employees out here in the Bay Area. So that's how I found Crisis Text Line. Pamela would love to hear your story.
Sure. The founder in the video you just saw, Nancy Livland, is we had a mutual friend who actually made the introduction, and she is the former founder and CEO of DoSomething.org, which is the largest youth activist organization for social change, organizing kids, nationally to do good in terms of everything from collecting food for food pantries to all kinds of sorts of volunteer work. And the source and the inspiration for Crisis Text Line communicating via text to young people came from that. Libby will talk about that in a moment. But I was introduced through some technology and venture capital activity we were involved in. As she was out looking to really start this organization as a technology startup, she knew how important the data would be and how sacred the privacy of what she was doing would be. So she first started in Silicon Valley to do that fundraising. So after hearing her and understanding what her goal was and her mission is to become this organization that would basically be not only a lifeline daily for the texters, but on the back end in terms of big data, and in this area that means a lot to people, what this could do for mental health awareness and for those gaining early access to mental health and free, which is not a word we use very often in connection with when seeking mental health resources in the U.S. Like everything, I actually like to understand things at a visceral level, so I signed up to be a volunteer crisis counselor, and I've been on the platform now, which we'll talk about a little bit more later, for almost 2 years. I think it'll be in the end of the summer, it'll be 2 years. I love it. It's the best volunteer job I've ever had. But more importantly, how I actually became kind of really emotionally connected with this too, is that I've raised kids for 20 years almost now in Silicon Valley. We live a few blocks away from Palo Alto High School. My kids attend another high school. But in the context of our first collection of suicides that occurred with young people, my kids were very, very small. So I watched this as a parent not involved in the school system. And I watched the information come out of that and how decisions were being making with really no data. We're going to change this, we're going to do this, or it's the kids' issues, it's the teachers, it's the school, it's the parents, and really not having that data to go on. And then so I kept thinking, gosh, we're really just making these decisions and having real life data. Where's the data coming from? How could we get our hands on what really is going on? Everyone's scratching their head. And so I saw Crisis Text Line as the ability to be able to kind of begin to amalgamate that precious data in an anonymous way, to be able to start to answer and kind of direct our resources in a really efficient way. Because in public schools we do not have that much resources to fool around with when it comes to, especially for mental health. Myself, I have an extended family member who died of substance abuse, so I remember as a 16, 17-year-old wondering, why can't we do more? How do we do more? How could this have been different? And so I think having someone as a teenager to be able to have reached out and talked about that with someone early on would have been a big difference for me. And so I have 3 high schoolers. One is graduating tomorrow, my happy dancing place right now. And it's been a blessing to go through the training in the process and the empathy aspect of the training, just to understand what teens are going through. It doesn't make me a perfect parent. I'm incredibly proud to be an imperfect parent. We're all flawed in that, but it just made me cleanly aware when I go off track. So those are some of the personal and some of the practical reasons why I became involved.
Awesome.
Keep speaking up, ladies, so we can hear you in the back.
Absolutely.
Great. So just building off what Pamela was saying about Nancy Livland, our founder, who you saw in the video, starting Crisis Text Line. So she is kind of a serial social entrepreneur. She started Dress for Success, which gets low-income women professional clothing to wear to interviews and to job visits. And then she was running DoSomething.org, which is this large organization to activate young people in social change. And they create change campaigns, like emailing your senator, beach cleanups, a whole range of things. And there are 5 million teens in this network. And they would email them about the campaigns and found that there was a really low open rate with teens opening emails. And so they started texting them because everyone kind of wants to get rid of that red bubble on your text messages when you have an unread message. So they found that when they switched to text, there was a 97% open rate for the messages for DoSomething.org. And the side effect with switching to text was that every so often they would get messages back that were not about the campaigns at all, but were teens in crisis asking for help. So things like, I'm being bullied at school, or I think I'm addicted to pot. And again, the message that really stopped them in their tracks was when a girl texted them saying that she was being raped by her father, as Nancy spoke to in the video. And at that moment, they sent her RAINN, Rape and Incest Network's hotline number, and said, please call this number, please get support. But also realized that there was a little bit of a disconnect between the ways that teens, and frankly more and more of us, are comfortable communicating over text, and the resources that existed out there. So there was no national text line, crisis text line that existed before us. And so that was about 4 years ago, and now, fast forward to current day, we've exchanged over 38 million messages with people in crisis. So even that video was a little bit outdated, just filmed a couple months ago when we were closer to 20 million messages. It's really rapidly growing. So again, Crisis Text Line provides free 24/7 confidential support for people in crisis, all by text. And you simply text 741-741. That's our short code. It's right up the left side of the keypad. And you're matched with a trained crisis counselor whose goal is to help you get to a calm moment through a variety of techniques that Pamela will touch on, but active listening, validating that texter, and really creating space for them to feel heard and seek resources if they need to. Why text? It's really private. It can be scary in those darkest moments to voice what's actually going on. It can feel like an easier, lower barrier to entry to text how you're feeling in those dark moments. And also, you can be in a situation that's potentially unsafe, right? You could be in your house and there is a dangerous situation there, and if you spoke on the phone, a perpetrator might hear you. Also, sometimes teens just don't want their parents to overhear that they're talking to someone, and text provides that more comfortable private medium. The asynchronous nature of text can also allow for you to really be doing this from anywhere. So we actually have people text us from the cafeteria at school who are sitting, at a table with friends, and maybe inside are really, really feeling like they're in crisis, like they're struggling. And you could never pick up the phone and do that in front of your friends privately, but you could text, and you could be texting with anyone.
This is especially true for middle schoolers who
Yes.
could, their friends think they're texting the cute guy or girl across the table, and they're really texting us saying or they're dealing with an eating disorder right at that moment, and they're trying to reach out and talk to someone at that very moment. Also, kids, when they're anxious or upsetting situations during a school day, where do they go? They run to the bathroom. So we get a ton of increase in our volume from middle school, younger high schoolers who are in a bathroom stall, sitting there texting and trying to get up the courage to go back into a situation or to get through the rest of the day. So from that sense of privacy is just truly, truly valuable to them.
Yes, school, bathroom, and cafeteria are actually some of the top 3 locations that are mentioned in text we have with texters in crisis. And it's not simply a line for suicide. We see such a range of issues. So 30% of our conversations are around suicide and depression, but we also have people texting in about family issues, about self-harm, which is not always a sign of being actively suicidal. Eating disorder issues. It's really a range, and also those issues are so interconnected, right? And so it's helpful to have one line where people can go to for support. About 2/3 of our conversations come between 8 p.m. and 4 a.m. So it really is that overnight time when friends, parents might be asleep, you don't have access to a school counselor or your trusted teacher. It's really those late night hours where we see highest volume. And then 75% of our texters are under the age of 25. So it really is a line not solely for teens, but our volume does mostly come from people under the age of 25. And now about 10% are under the age of 13. So it's definitely getting younger. But we were also surprised to see when we started this, and asdosomething.org was this teen-based network, we were surprised to see 25% are over the age of 25, right? And as a crisis counselor, I have texted with veterans experiencing PTSD, with people going through divorces, a huge range of things, and so that's why we don't talk about it as simply a teen service.
Yeah, some of my most interesting conversations come from seniors who are isolated or shut in at home or dealing with a life of chronic pain, and looking for more resources that we'll talk about that we can refer people to. And the loneliness, the isolation, the world isn't just about being in small towns. It's doubles for the word isolation, and that is a key component of why people are trying to reach out via text.
Mm-hmm. And then 19% of our text volume comes from the 10% lowest income area codes across the US. So we actually over-index on serving low-income areas that might not have as many resources available to them for free mental health support. These are just some examples of what actual texters have said. So you have no idea how much this helped me. I think I'll talk to my school guidance counselor and get some legit help. Thank you for listening when I was scared to actually speak the words and making me feel like there was nothing wrong with me. So we get thousands of these texter feedback. So the way that it works is at the end of a conversation, there's an optional opt-in survey where they can give more information and give feedback to that counselor who they chatted with. And so we get thousands every week of these responses that say, thank you for saving my life. I might not be here if it wasn't for you. Really, really meaningful bits of feedback.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about, a lot of times I'll have a conversation with someone in the grocery store about crisis text line. I'd love to talk about it. And at the end of the conversation, they'll say, oh, so you're talking to teenagers on the phone all day. And I'm like, no, I'm down here. So I want to explain a little bit about the platform, which I'll refer to is our, the technology behind what we do and how we as crisis volunteer counselors work versus how it works for the tester and what we see. So first of all, who are we as crisis counselors? We run the gamut. You have to be 18 years old to apply, and I'll talk about the application process in a moment. So we have 18-year-old college students who are mature and have gone through the training and have been vetted through our training process. As Libby mentioned, we have, I think last count was 150 veterans amongst our 3,100 plus crisis counselors nationwide. College students I mentioned, we have grandmothers and grandfathers, we have mother-daughter teams, mother-son teams that do their shifts together. The deaf and hard of hearing community who know a thing or two about feeling isolated or have a large presence as part of our crisis counselors and have proven to be a really great asset for us as a community. And then survivors. So there are people who are survivors of suicide attempts or eating disorders who were there to have gone through their training and gone through their self-care and their own therapy processes and are making amazing strides as counselors as well. And within that group, the qualifications can be, as I said, just an 18-year-old in college. We also have professionals who aren't working in the field or who want to do this in addition to their professional work. So there's a lot of expertise out there in our crisis counselor group. As far as the training goes, the application, you simply go online to our site, crisistextline.org, and there's an apply button there. But we have a kind of a two-part application process. The first part involves a background check, which is the pre-employment background check that you would do for any kind of scenario you're working with kids in camps and things of that nature, preschools and so forth. And a few introductory questions would kind of help the trainers to understand whether or not you might be a good candidate to go through the rest of the training. It's about a 34-hour online training. And so what that looks like is I'm in my pajamas at home in front of the fireplace or at the dining room table or wherever is comfortable for you with a good internet connection. And I'm being led through a series of video modules, both with my trainer, who is online with me at the same time, and also on my own. So you do some of the work kind of en masse with some of your fellow, your Core Hope members, and then you're also doing some of that work offline, and then you finish by doing texts, and you're kind of quizzed on that. And that's a process that lasts about, what, Libby, now about 5 to 6 weeks?
6 weeks, yeah.
And we also do live role play. So you, as my fellow trainee, might take a turn at being the texter with an issue, and I'll be the counselor, and then we switch. And so our supervisors are monitoring that and helping to redirect us, and we kind of assess that after we're done. We are trained in active and empathetic listening, effective listening, as Libby has said. So we learn about what makes the context of a good conversation, and how do you build rapport with someone before you just don't jump right in to say, well, here's what we need to do. It takes a little bit of time to understand and lead them through that, exploring what the problem is, exploring kind of collaborative problem solving, and then trying to get them to a place where they feel empowered to do one of two things: reach out and help themselves, whether that be in an emergency situation, or to be able to use coping skills that we will lead them through, so that they are able to be better prepared the next time they have that panic attack in the middle of the supermarket or whatever the situation might be. We are trained in doing suicidal risk assessment. Our jargon is it's a ladder up. So are they feeling suicidal? Do they have a plan? Do they have the means? In front of which case would lead us into a conversation that talk about, can we put that away while we talk? If there's pills in front of you that you are contemplating, can you put that in the drawer? Can you put that in the medicine cabinet in the other room while we talk, so that I know you're safe while we have a conversation? And then a time frame, which is most importantly, yes, I'm planning to do this right after I get out of school. That's been an answer before. And that helps us flag a supervisor who can then begin a process that checks and says, yes, this is something we might need to go deeper in, and then be able to alert 911. Our training advisors, all of the training that I just spoke about, and by the way, there's a very large module on self-care. It's what we start with as crisis counselors, because self-care is a large part of what we talk about with our texters. So we ourselves are trained in what's your favorite self-care, and it can be anything from having your puppies on your lap, to a bubble bath, to your own meditation, your own therapy, whatever works for you to bring you back into your happy place. It's what keeps everybody in balance who does this type of work. So we're trained, first and foremost, a large part of our training is about that. So our training has been vetted and reviewed by the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, National Domestic Violence Hotline, Raven Incest Network, and the National Eating Disorder Association for validity and kind of best practices. So we're using the same sort of techniques.
And I also wanted to say two skills that we learn in training that I've really taken into my own life. One of them is validation. So when we're communicating with texters, validating everything they're feeling. So it's understandable that you're feeling overwhelmed. That's a lot to handle. It's normal that you're feeling that way. It's understandable, it's normal. And then strength identification. So it's so brave of you for reaching out. That takes a lot of courage. It's really strong of you to text in tonight. Things that can, display to them the strengths that they have. If they've said something like, oh, I don't want to burden my friends, so I don't want to talk to them about it. It sounds like you're a really, really caring friend. And I'm thinking if the roles were reversed, you would really hope your friend was reaching out to you. So that validation and strength identification are two skills that have really stuck with me.
I was just texting with another crisis counselor last night who said, I've stopped asking people in my everyday life why they feel that way. Mm-hmm. It's a negative approach to it. It's sort of like, well, how are you dealing with that? But asking why is an immediate defense. And so that's something I've incorporated in my daily language. I always catch myself if I want to go, well, why would you do that to my own kid? It's like, oh, okay. So we do bring that training into our own. Here we go. So talking a little bit literally about how it works when I'm on the platform. First of all, Libby she said the great thing about that you're not alone in this. Well, neither are you as a crisis counselor volunteer in this. We have 3 or 4 different ways that we are supported once we do get on the platform. I'm going to go through a little bit of these. I'm actually going to go through it in reverse order here. First of all, your peers. Whenever you're on a shift, there's anywhere between 20 and 50 of your peers in the global chat box. that you can turn and ask for expertise. And amongst those amongst those crisis counselors, there are some deep vertical expertise. We mentioned the number of veterans. We mentioned the number of professionals that are actually on it. There are people who have actually gone through some of the scenarios that our texters might be. So you're able to say, hey, I'm having trouble getting to this part of my conversation. What are some suggestions? And they're right there. So you, even though you're by yourself in your home, you actually have this incredible support group around you as this community. Your supervisor is always there with you. They check in with you beginning of your shift. They are monitoring you. I'll show you a screenshot of that in just a moment. They are monitoring you the entire time you're on. Now, as you gain expertise, you get 20 conversations under your belt, 100 conversations under your belt. You get a little bit less, hand-holding, but they are still there. Your conversations are always visible on their screen. So the minute you're thinking, gee, this might turn into something differently, they're right there the whole time. And then Libby, or the video mentioned earlier, our machine learning and our algorithms, that's there to support us the entire time. Both our texters and learning what their keywords that we know how to expedite and to bring up and give priority to what their needs are, but also for our counselors to know what's working and what to be looking out for, and what types of things. She mentioned smart and brave and proud. Those 3 words have shown to be some of them in our most beneficial conversations, kind of self-reported by texters, to be some 3 of the most powerful words. So next time you have a conversation, particularly with a young person, think about using smart, brave, and proud in a genuine manner as you work into your conversation, because those have proven to be very, very helpful. So the machine learning helps us with stack ranking. So if you can see here, up here, there's some of these are different color coded. She mentioned that. So someone who texts in about, I'm feeling suicidal today, would have a higher priority in the queue automatically over someone who says, I'm not feeling good today because I had a fight with my sister, for instance.
And tactically, so how that works is when you text into 741-741, the first thing that happens is you get an automated message back that says, what's on your mind? Based on how a texter responds to that, that's how we rank them in our queue. So if they say, I want to die, or help me now, those are people who are going to be automatically, we call internally code orange, and pushed up in the queue. And so for all those code orange texters who we've recognized they've said high risk words or phrases, they're matched with a crisis counselor in an average of 52 seconds. So they get matched fastest with a live human crisis counselor. It's always our goal to get to all texters in under 5 minutes. And right now we're at about 90% of texters are reached in under 5 minutes. I'm seeing a hand.
If they're orange coded, do they get sent to a volunteer that has had more experience? Is the coding also?
So the question was, if they're coded orange, do they get sent to a volunteer with more experience? Right now, no. Our volunteers are trained all in a very solid way. However, if they happen to be matched with a volunteer who's a little bit newer, so maybe they're in their first couple shifts, the supervisor is going to be really actively involved in that conversation. And if the crisis counselor says, this conversation is too much for me, I don't feel comfortable, we have a really easy mechanism of transferring a conversation to another crisis counselor. And that looks seamless to the texter, so they don't know I've been transferred. It looks like a seamless experience, like it's the same person for the texter.
Conversation to me, I continue on in her same case. We're sort of trained to kind of also mimic what her tone is in the messages and to match the semantics and so forth and the sentence structure and so forth. We do this in 160 characters. So it is very short, and it sometimes depends on, you can tell right away if you're texting with a 13-year-old or someone who is not familiar with how technology works at all. It becomes pretty evident during the conversations to kind of what, and so you kind of keep up that same, and so we're trained to do that as well. And Libby will tell me maybe what the key things were so that I have a summary already when I jump right in the midway in the conversation. And this is a very different approach to phone-based hotlines, right? You don't say, here, let me put you on hold and Susie will now help you. That doesn't work, right? So this is a win-win for our counselors, for volunteers, as well as to kind of keep everything in balance.
Yeah, and one more thing I want to say about the supervisors. So we've mentioned that a couple of times. Supervisors are full-time staff with Crisis Text Line who have higher degrees in social work, psychology, or a related field. They're full-time with us, and they are monitoring and on 24/7, and they're matched with certain crisis counselors who they have a live view of those conversations, which she'll show.
And so this is an example here where a supervisor can pop right in and say, hey, I see that you're having this conversation. Maybe you should ask them about this. Or remember to, don't forget to take a little more time to establish rapport before jumping into a problem-solving part of your conversation. So the supervisors can be that active, and that's an immediate thing that's ongoing while I'm looking at that screen. And the younger or the newer I am as a crisis counselor, the more frequently that might happen.
But how are you getting that as the volunteer?
So in other words, on this side, this is me.
Right.
I'm here, so this is my conversation. And the supervisor will come in and say, oh, I'll see you've been talking to
Your screen looks
this.
like this.
My screen looks like this. Okay, the supervisor's screen looks like this.
Okay.
Okay, so they are able to mark and to also place their own priorities on, oh, this is a younger counselor or newer counselor, I can watch extra for them, or this is a high-risk conversation, I'm going to spend more time on that. Okay? So they are juggling that. And the other thing about, Libby mentioned the how asynchronous text is that we sort of think about seeing our kids in the backseat going, oh yeah, sure, yeah, let's go, LOL, back and forth. Sometimes it's 5-6 minutes before the next response comes. So it's might be because it's being thoughtful and reflected. It might be because something just changed in the environment that the texter is in. They're not able to, a parent walked in the room or an aggressor walked in the room. So you are able to take on more than one texter at the same time. So sometimes I will have 1, 2, maybe 3, maybe 4, depending upon how high level of a counselor you are, in which case we're always able to hand one of those off as one of those become higher risk.
So Pamela, if you have downtime, you have to train yourself to stay on this entire time and not do anything else while you're doing this?
The question is if I have downtime, meaning the texters are not coming through very quickly or answering very quickly, do I have time? What else do I do?
Yeah.
Downtime is a kind of a misnomer. Right now, our queue is very, very busy. Our traffic is increasing. Libby will talk to a little bit about what is driving that traffic to us. But yes, there are times when you're sort of like, we talked about the global chat. You see this blurred out area here to the left? This is an ongoing conversation amongst the 20 to 40 counselors. So at that point, we're sort of then sharing details and data that we've learned on the ship. Boy, we've seen a lot of this today. She'll talk about the election. We've seen a lot of these types of things today. Does anybody know what this is? What's a good solution? And we'll start brainstorming about things down the side of the thing. That will keep you kind of focused, and it might be answering a question from a previous shift you had kind of in your head. So it's kind of a constant training process while you're on the platform. Yeah.
Is the coding for the conversations, is it based only on that initial response of what's wrong, or can it change throughout the conversation? Like if someone initially says, oh, I'm sad, but through the course of your conversation they say, I'm feeling suicidal, do they then switch to a code orange?
Let me see what the next one is here. So I don't know the actual color code.
So the purpose of that coding orange is to match them with a crisis counselor as quickly as possible. So once they're already matched with a crisis counselor and in a conversation, there's not really a need to change it in severity, but our machine learning is always understanding what words and phrases are triggering something to result in an active rescue situation when we're calling emergency services. So that data is always useful to be able to put into that algorithm of what would someone say to cause them to be an active rescue situation.
I know I walked out of line of sight, but I want to explain something here too, how that works. You may not be able to see these different icons here, but these are ways I become directly connected to my supervisor immediately. One of these is a flag. So when you have gone through your 4 steps of suicide ideation and you're like, this is not going to turn out, in a calm manner, we flag the supervisor comes in immediately, takes that assessment, may make 1 or 2 suggestions, will then immediately be in touch with 911 or the local crisis response unit in that community and begin trying to seek help for that person at that moment actively. So that is one way. We also keep, for frequent or chronic texters, we're able to do a summary, a management summary, so that we know that if someone who texts them repeatedly for the same type of thing, what has been worked in the past, and how to manage that texter a little more efficiently so that you don't start the wheel, reinvent the wheel every single time. So there's other ways here that we're managing it too, so it allows us to have that flexibility.
We have about 15 minutes to get through the rest of our presentation, and I would say we're only probably halfway through. Can we hold questions, and then we'll have a good half hour for Q&A, and we might be answering some of these questions as we continue as well.
So resources for texture. We are, as Libby said, our goal is to move them from a hot spot to a cool calm, get them to think and problem solve for themselves, and maybe take that initial step, next step, whatever it needs to be. However, sometimes they need a little extra help to do that, or they may not be in a position to be able to seek outside mental health care resources. So we provide about 350 right now screen vetted resources for our texters that we use as referrals, and only about 20% or so of our conversations end up in getting referrals for a texter, because we try to make sure that their problems are dealt with when they come to us originally. But for instance, it might be someone who was called in about an eating disorder, and we want to make sure that they have additional support and additional online support group if they're not able to go and do that in their own hometown. So our national board looks at these resources, and they're vetted for discrimination. We don't want someone to be able to try to turn them down for reasons that we would not do that for. There are no religious organizations involved in the referrals. And also they have to be free, because that's what we're about. And to be able to have a level of quality of service that we would provide if we were more experts in certain levels. So there would be other suicide services. There would be LGBTQ services that are good ones, such as the Trevor Project. And so that's another aspect of what we do, and that is another tool for our crisis counselors to go to. So people volunteer for a lot of personal, a lot of practical reasons. Libby and I talked a little bit about what the reasons why we volunteered, but I think what we hear a lot from our crisis counselors en masse is that because practicing empathy and reflective listening makes me a better friend, a partner, and employee. I maintain if everybody had to go through this training as a middle schooler, we wouldn't have any need for this service going forward. It really does give you an idea of how to be tolerant and accept and understand and meet people where they're at in their problem and their pain, and that's what we're trying to do via text and via the training. And it teaches other people about believing in hope and trusting your process and having a deep compassion for others. So it's something I think all of us could agree which should be in vogue these days. The other thing that reason to volunteer and people say is that once they became a part of Crisis Text Line, the community is incredibly strong. You met Bob Filden, our chief data scientist, earlier. He puts out a weekly newsletter that lets us know what the current stats are, what the temperature is of what's going on out there, what's trending, and how we're responding to it. We get supervisor tips. On the right there you'll see a video about something very specifically, something you may be having trouble. Are you having trouble handling anger management? People who are calling in about having that kind of violent aspect to them, or maybe even homicidal tendency to them, and how to deal with that. Or simply how to, we had a great one from an autistic counselor, how to be respectful when addressing someone who might text in who may be on the autism spectrum, and what's the right verbiage. And obviously you can imagine that with our LGBTQ community, a lot of training needed, making sure you're using the right pronoun and such. So we're getting these special type of training ongoing while you're part there. We also get a lot of perks as crisis counselor. We've got Headspace right there, which is the online meditation service. We get a free trial for that, I think a free year for that. Free tickets to, where's the last one?
Giants.
Great America, to the Giants, all sorts of things like that. Coupons and things that are special when we have particularly difficult evenings. We're able to purchase things with our crisis text line logos on it to spread the word. And we are taking good care of, we each are assigned a crisis counselor advocate who's a full-time employee who checks in with. Mrs. Pamela, I noticed that you didn't do one of your sessions because you were traveling. Just checking and making sure everything's okay, you know. So the flexibility and the sense of community here is another real reason why we're so happy as counselors to be a part of this. Libby holds crisis counselor meetups in San Francisco and Palo Alto, where we get to actually meet the counselors in our area, which is really kind of fun. We're a really diverse group of people, and they are an amazing group of people. This is happening all over the nation, New York, Atlanta, Denver, and so forth. Sometimes Nancy, our CEO, is there as part of it, and sometimes it's just the counselors themselves. So it's always a treat when she pops up. And annually we have a We call it a palooza. It's a national meetup, in which case we do additional training. We get to meet each other. We learn about what the company is planning on a future basis, where we're going directionally, both on a business and a nonprofit scale, and have a lot of good, bonding experiences as well.
All right, so I am going to get into some things about our data and partnerships. So we partner with organizations across the U.S. Some are national organizations like NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness, NEDA, National Eating Disorder Association. We've recently partnered with the Golden Gate Bridge here in the Bay Area, which is unfortunately the #1 site of suicide in the nation. So they've added 30 signs to the bridge and in the parking lots for Crisis Text Line's number to be there. We actually have had multiple successful encounters where we've been texting with someone who is on their way to the bridge, and we've contacted Bridge Patrol, and they are able to identify that person and get them to safety. We partner with corporations too. So on YouTube, if you search suicide or if you search how to hang myself on YouTube, our number is actually the first thing that comes up in the search results. On Facebook, there's a new flow where you're able to flag a friend's post as suicidal. This is relatively new in the last 6 months. They've added it. So you can flag a friend's post as suicidal. That friend's service will be interrupted, and it will say, someone's worried about you. Here are some options of things you can do. One of those options is to message with a crisis counselor, our crisis counselors, within Facebook Messenger. So we have a product integration with them that it's not only over text, we also are available over Facebook Messenger as well. Kind of a similar flow in Instagram as well. I know the kids aren't even really using Facebook these days. A similar flow on Instagram, you can see in that right screenshot, and then we are in works with Snapchat as well, because we know that's really where they are.
It's interesting to note in the data for the transfers we have through Facebook, Instagram, those do have a higher level of high risk probability than those who are finding us just happenstance on the web.
Right. You can imagine the people who are searching suicide on YouTube are probably at a higher risk state. And then, so we use data both to make ourselves more efficient and more effective, and to share that with the world. And so we've talked about the stack ranking. Some of our key performance indicators that we are gauging every day, one of those is wait time, so percentage of texters that we are matching with crisis counselors in under 5 minutes. I mentioned that's around 90%. And then quality. So that is at the end of every conversation, there's an automated message that says, was this conversation helpful, Y or N? A texter simply has to text that. And right now, about 88% of texters say that the conversation was helpful to them. And that's really useful for us to keep a gauge on. We get that daily. In the last 24 hours, what was our quality score? Over the last month, what was our quality score? For individual crisis counselors, what are their quality scores? So that we can have a pulse on individual and an organization as we grow and scale. How do we maintain that quality? And then there are keywords that we have noticed. So this was slightly mentioned in the video, but we found that the word ibuprofen or words associated with that, so Tylenol, Advil, are 16 times more likely to result in an active rescue calling emergency services than the word suicide. We don't know exactly why, but as Nancy mentioned in the video, it could be because they might be higher up on that ladder, right? They have identified means that they want to use. It's really accessible. And then we share this data with the world and share it publicly. So we have a website called crisistrends.org. I really recommend you check it out. But we show the aggregate trends through these 38 million messages. So one thing is, what do you guys think the worst day of the week for suicidal ideation is?
Friday night.
Sunday, end of the weekend, the whole week's ahead of you. And then what about stress? What day of the week do you think's worse for that? Hump day, Wednesday. There are also breakdowns, not by day, but of time of day. So we found with substance abuse conversations, they peak at 6 a.m. which is kind of interesting. A lot of other conversations, suicidal ideation, depression, peaks kind of late night, midnight time, but substance abuse conversations peak 6 a.m. potentially after a come down or something of that sort. We also do these open data collaborations with research institutes. So we have about 20 research partners. One of them is this Brain Research Institute in Utah, who has this hypothesis that at different altitudes, brain chemistry changes. And so they're looking at our depression and suicidal ideation data and mapping that to area codes and the altitudes of those area codes to try to understand if there's a connection with higher altitudes and more suicidal ideation and depression. Some interesting trends that have come up. So in the 24 hours after the election, we had 4 times our normal volume. The most common association was the word scared with LGBTQ issues. 5% of people mentioned anxiety about family disagreements. 2.2% of all of our conversations were about immigration. This was a very, very high volume, intense day for us. And we've still seen, it wasn't just that day. We've still seen this as a common theme since November 8th.
Yeah. It was very interesting. My husband and I were both online overnight as volunteers. And within the first 24 hours, the traffic, I want to say, doubled. And then within 48 hours, became, and that's kind of our new norm in terms of what it said. It hasn't really kind of gone down. So what I think is amazing, we'll talk a little bit more, but this organization and the way that we're tracking the data has become a barometer for what you see in the mental health fields across, in mental health access and care across the nation in ways that we hope will better inform and turn into the ability to predict when some of these things are going to happen and help everybody better staff up, whether it be a local organization or us,
right,
or be more prepared as these things happen. We're
right,
seeing them happen in real time.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting to track the real-time trends. And then also for like resource allocation, if we know that eating disorder conversations peak on Mondays, what can we do in schools to better support that trend in the area? 13 Reasons Why. I'm guessing some people in here have heard about this Netflix show.
If anybody has not heard about 13 Reasons Why? Okay.
So 13 Reasons Why is a show that Netflix released on March 31st, and it depicts the suicide of a high school-aged girl and kind of the chaos that ensues after that. And so we have seen about 3% since the release of it, since the month or so after the release of it, 3% of our conversations have directly mentioned 13 Reasons Why. 67% of those are first-time texters. So we're happy, at least, that if these people are in crisis, they, because of this show, they are reaching out for the first time and know about a resource that exists. 65% of these people texting about 13 Reasons Why are sharing something they've never shared before with anyone else. And top issues that we see associated with these conversations: depression, suicidal ideation, and friend and family issues. So
it's important, I just want to say, it's important to note that when the series first started, we were not associated with them in terms of being given as a resource before or after the viewing of it. A few episodes into it, they reached out to Crisis Text Line as one of the resources about what they can do to sort of address this reaction that they should have anticipated that did not, it sounds like. And so we then, I think at the end, but I think we've been moved now to the beginning.
Yeah, so it was about a month after they released the show, and the way it's released on Netflix, all the episodes go out at one time, people binge it. So unfortunately, the people who watched it in the first month did not see this kind of trigger warning resource guide that is now part of the episodes. But there's a season 2, and we're happy to get the resource to more people who need it. And also clearly there are some concerns
And it's
around the
not-
triggering
it's not
nature.
gonna go away. This has been a very successful series for them, more so than Orange is the New Black and House of Cards, I think, combined. So it's not going to go away. So we feel really good that we're at least part of helping to address what may become the results of that. There were 1,200 conversations in the first 18 days that came through Crisis Text Line. So that was
About this show.
Yeah, about this
Yeah.
show alone. So.
And then I wanted to talk a little bit about what we're doing in the Bay Area and on the West Coast. So we've now had over 37,000 conversations with people in the Bay Area, and we know that this area over-indexes compared nationally on isolation, third-party texters, and bereavement. I mentioned the 30 signs put up on the Golden Gate Bridge. Caltrain has also added signs in the stations, on the trains, and soon on the tracks as well. These are just a couple of things in local high schools. Gunn and Pali both now have Crisis Text Line on the back of student IDs. This is a really nice kind of permanent place that students always have, so let's get it in Sequoia District too. Anyone here who has that ability? This is just an example of stickers at Menlo School. I know Sacred Heart, Woodside Priory have in the bathrooms, and kind of this is when you're about to enter a classroom, so it's right near the handle of the door that you kind of look at it. Also, I know Pamela's mentioned, I think it's Woodside Priory when you're walking out.
Leaving the classroom after a stressful time, it's right there eye level when you leave out of many of the teachers' classrooms.
Palo Alto Unified School District did a poster design contest where 80 students submitted posters that have Crisis Text Line's information, and the finalists are printed and put around campus. So another great idea of actually engaging the students as well in what the service is and how they can utilize it. These are just some examples of ways to get involved as educators, as students, and as parents. We've done a couple of all-school assemblies, worked with different counseling departments at various districts around the area. Morning announcements is a great place. Parents, if you're interested in volunteering, clearly we're looking for more volunteers, because we always say there's just kind of no shortage of pain in the world. And as we're a two-sided organization where we're both training and recruiting crisis counselors and serving texters, we're always constrained really by the side of volunteers, and we would love more. So I love to do Q&A. Sounds like there were some questions.
Well, before we do that, let's
Sure.
do Libby and Pamela.
Thank you.
So, school nurse in every high school,
Yep.
been doing it for 35 years. Dummy down. So I have a cell phone, and I want to be able to encourage my students at Redwood Alternative High School, the highest risk high school that we have in the Sequoia Union High School District. I know they text all the time. So how would I get to this right now?
So you have your phone out right now. What I would say is have them bring their phone out.
Right.
Create a contact that says, it could even be shorthand, CTL. Okay, and then type in 741-741 and have them save it to their contacts. Okay, so it's right at the left-hand side of the keyboard, but if they have it in their contacts, then you can say, hey, or maybe there's a keyword that maybe this person has panic attacks, or so maybe they can enter it as panic, and like they can look up and panic and hit 741-741. They can text anything, like I need help, I'm feeling panic. Well, we like them to text Bay as the intro because we know it's coming from this area. We can help track the dynamics here. But they can simply even just text a blank message, and that starts the conversation. And as Libby said, immediately, usually within 5 minutes, we have a live counselor on with them. But the opening response to them might be, "Hi, thanks for texting into Crisis. Here's our kind of rules, and sort of like you get with the iPhone. You have to agree to these things or not." And then we're going to help match you with a counselor immediately. what seems to be on your mind, or what, what got you to text in today? So that we then might have like, I failed my math exam and I can't go home because my mom's gonna kill me. That sort of thing, or whatever the issue might be, that starts the ball rolling. So by the time I, as a live counselor, come on, I might have a little bit of information that I can pick right back up and then immediately establish rapport. I might introduce myself, see if they want to share their name, and then we're off and running. Sounds like you're having a really tough time at school today. Can you tell me a little bit more? And then we're off and running. So that's the easiest way, is when Libby does it is simply, she has all of the students take their phones out and enter it into their phone as a contact. It's also a great way, Libby mentioned about third-party texters and bereavement over-indexing in the Bay Area. That means a lot of things, but one of the things I think it means importantly to this group when we're talking about high schoolers is that what's unique about this here, we don't have a higher rate of suicide nationally than most other places, which is kind of a misnomer. What we do have is a higher level of people who know someone who are directly affected by a suicide at a young age. So that is higher kind of on. And with that comes bereavement. You're worried about a friend a lot. You're mourning a situation that may not even be directly related to you, but has been on your mind, that can trigger you. So for them to have the contact, 741, in their phone, they can share that with a friend. That if you're that go-to person, someone always comes and talks to. I have one daughter like that who's the peacemaker. Everyone loves to go and talk to her. But at some point, whew, so when that becomes too much, you can say, hey, if you can't reach me tonight, you can text this number. And there's live counselors, really caring, compassionate people who can continue the conversation with you. Here, let me give you the number, and they can just share that contact. So it's a way that empowers kids to do it without coming across as preachy or, having to be defensive.
Yes.
I know that it's private, it's confidential, it's that when you go to active rescue, how do you manage the panic that you've now gone from a confidential thing to an active engagement where it's going to be, rescue services coming to them, and not have them panic and disappear, or what's the process there?
Right. So, yes, happy to. When it switches from a confidential service to this person is at imminent risk of suicide and we need to get emergency services to them, how do we go about handling that? So you are free to test the service and text 741741 and say that you're testing it, please. But we send our terms of service as an automated message, which as a hotline, as any crisis line would, we break confidentiality when a person is at imminent risk of hurting themselves. We're really trying to keep them engaged, as if we know they're at imminent risk and we want to keep them texting with us. It kind of depends on the situation. If we tell them, we're going to get you help, versus we know this person is really not safety planning with us, they are help rejecting, but they are at imminent risk and they've said in the next 24 hours tonight they are taking their life, then we go about calling emergency services for them. And we have the location through either the location they've told us, because since they're texting into a helpline, they often want help, and they do share their location when we ask them. And if they don't, the best we have to go on is their area code, which we know isn't perfect, but actually for our demographic, which skews younger, it's more likely their area code does correspond with where they live. So we will call emergency services based on what the area code is. They will have the ability to ping the cell phone and find the location of it. Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
Oh, kudos to how you are intelligently addressing such a big problem with technology. I mean, it's really impressive. I was a little confused by your statement that we have about the same average number of suicides in this area as other areas, but people know of someone who's done it more often here. I don't quite understand that.
I would just say for the data that Crisis Text Line has collected, we're not talking about census data of suicides in this area versus other places. For what people are texting in to Crisis Text Line about, which we have people text in about suicidal ideation across the US, but it's not over-indexed here versus other places. The amount of conversations that are regarding suicidal ideation here is in line with what we see across the nation. But what is over-indexed is people texting in about bereavement or third-party texters. So this isn't hard and fast data, but this is what Crisis Text Line sees in our conversations and what over-indexes here.
I do think there is information out there you can Google for Santa Clara County and
Yes.
like that, and then compare that to the rest of California, and then compare that to the rest
Yeah.
of the rest, and I think you'll find the similar findings, but what we're quoting is our own,
Yeah.
our own area data.
The CDC just released a report in the past couple months about suicide rates in Santa Clara County versus California versus the U.S.
Safety Net Project, right, too.
Yes. Yes.
So when you're volunteering, you're on a computer screen.
I am.
Okay, so you're typing in responses, and what you're saying is on your computer screen. So the conversation that you have with your supervisor is on that screen, visible to you while you're.
Right. The question is, what am I on? What am I on? Am I on a laptop? Am I on a screen when I sit down and volunteer? Yes, I'm on my laptop, and down the side, left side is my global chatting with my peers. I request a texture from our queue. It pops up on my screen. I know whether or not it's orange or just regular scenario. The automated response has already started. They may have made a comment or two, sometimes many, depending upon how open they're going to be, and we start. If it's going well and we have a large queue, I'll take another texture. In the meantime, my supervisor will check in and say, oh, hi, I see this one has been going on longer than usual. Need any help? And I'll be like, no, we're just wrapping up things. That sort of thing. When I complete those conversations, I then fill out a post-conversation survey, which also helps us track data about what were the issues mentioned in the conversation, so we can then begin to have data from both sides. How did the texture appear at the end of the conversation, a quick summary of what it was, and then also how I feel about the conversation. That I feel like it went well, that I feel like I was well prepared. So all of that is being collected and can feed back into a measurement of like how well I'm doing as a counselor, as well as how well the texture is being served.
So when that call comes in, is it color coded for you?
Yes.
And does that, to her question, does the color coding change in the midst? Does the algorithm look at the words that are being used, and will the color change?
So I think what you're referring to, the question is, does the algorithm look at the color while I'm in conversation and change in mid-conversation? I think what you're talking about is real time.
Yes.
I don't believe that actual conversation code changes immediately unless a supervisor changes it.
Witnesses the words, is looking at your.
Right. But remember, when I'm in a conversation, I'm no longer just looking at algorithm data. I'm using the actual conversations. I'm leading them through the process. And I'm leading them through that 4-step suicide ideation. And if they've told me, yeah, I've got my, I'm going to take all of my sleeping pills tonight. I've already written a letter to my children, and, I've locked my doors in my house. And, and I plan to do this tonight, and it meets all these requirements, then that I'm having that conversation. So I make the decision to flag the supervisor. I think this is an active rescue scenario. They may take it further, or we may try to de-escalate depending upon the situation.
Yes.
So a lot of text conversations are 3-word sentences, and abbreviations, and emojis. Do you actively try to move them to full sentences, or do they naturally go there in the course of what you're doing?
The question is, we have a lot of emojis, a lot of LOLs, a lot of crying faces, that sort of thing. Yes, sometimes the younger texters, we do experience that, but I have to tell you, the actual reality is that if you're in a one-on-one, if anybody's been in a therapy session, or if you've taken your child to one, there's a lot of, I don't know, I guess so, I guess I feel that way, kind of. You don't get that in text. They may be confused or not really sure about why they've texted in, but they made that big step themselves without anybody else in the room, an adult person in most cases to do so. So you really get hard fact status. I'm afraid to come out to my parents. They're homophobic. I think I'm going to run away. It's like bam, bam, bam. And that can be in one text, okay? So that's more of what we get. But what we do try to do is to meet them where they're at in this conversation. So we're trained, for instance, if someone puts a smiley face in or something that we're using emojis, if it's appropriate, we might reflect back some of those emojis. That's part of your active and reflective listening. But we do always ask to clarify. There's a lot of acronyms out there. I'm my age, they're their age, and I say, can you help me understand what this means? oh, thank you for doing that. Sorry I had to ask. And they're like, oh, no problem. Thanks for asking. And then we continue on. So we always try to clarify.
And I would say the group of peers that is online at the same time, so there's 70 other crisis counselors online, that's a great place to go to say, does anyone know what whatever acronym means? And there's a big range of ages, range of perspectives there, and that's where that really comes into play to help.
The Urban Dictionary a couple times. To be honest with you, I've been.
Yeah.
So you don't use your phone?
No.
And when you're on the job, you're on your shift,
Correct.
you're at home or you're somewhere with a laptop.
Secure location.
You never use your phone. You don't get access when you're standing in line at the grocery store and you pull out your phone or something like that.
No, the question is, again, we're never on our phone as a crisis counselor. In fact, our technology is only suitable for laptops right now, not iPads and so forth. Multiple reasons. Because it works that way, we can take a tremendous increase in load in the way the platform is designed right now, and that's what we're focused on, so that we are surefire in any kind of emergency situation where we see traffic double, triple election day notwithstanding. But also because we want them to be in a secure environment. Libby doesn't need to be on my shoulder because that conversation with myself and the texter at that time is private and confidential. So if somebody comes into the room in my office, I'm like, what can I do for you? Great, it's in the kitchen, and then back and forth. It's nothing that is shared except between you, the texter, and the supervisor. And so that would be hard to do if you're standing in the grocery line. Obviously, distractions, et cetera.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, and going back to her question about the active rescue, if the texter refuses to give the address, you do have the technology and ability to find that exact house.
So we work with the emergency services department to find the location.
So 911 can find the house, they can find the house from the way what we're doing. So.
And one clarification about volunteering is that we ask for 4 hours a week. You can split that up into two hours one night, 2 hours a different night, but you have a shift that you've signed up for. So again, you would have a set time where you're sitting down to do that. It would not be on the go in the grocery store.
How much of a goal is it to tie the texter to local resources and local referrals?
So at this point, we're a national service, and our database of resources is not direct care providers. It is websites where you can go to find support groups, to find breathing, grounding exercises, to go to 211 and actually find some local providers. So at this point, we have a national database of resources.
Mm-hmm. But to her point, 211, for instance, is one of our vetted referral sources. If someone calls and says, I'm looking for housing, or I need a shelter place to stay, we explain to them 211 is an organization. You can either dial it yourself, or I can give you the link here, and they're able to lead you through in what county you are, in what city, so that they can provide a link to a resource that might be helpful. So it's not directly from us, but our resources, our referrals are there to help facilitate that. But as we grow and expand, that would be a lovely goal.
Yeah.
And how much is it prioritized that way in the texting in terms of local? If I text from here, am I just as likely to get somebody in New York, or is it prioritized always to somebody more local?
Yeah, so the question is, are our texters in the Bay Area matched with crisis counselors in the Bay Area? No, we optimize for speed always. So we're trying to get you matched with a crisis counselor as quickly as possible. That could be someone here, that could be someone in New York, depending on who's available. Our crisis counselors are trained in the same way. So we found that was more important to optimize on speed rather than the location and the local knowledge, because we're not, as crisis counselors, providing information we know about the local area. We're simply creating space for you to share what's going on and be validated. I know a hand has been up back there. Did you have a question?
Yes, my question is actually, how do they decide how many, how do they decide how many texts you will get at the same time? I mean, I know it depends on how long you're in this volunteer job and how good you are, right?
Yeah.
How do they decide that you can handle the 4 out of 5?
Yeah, so the question was how many conversations can people handle at a time? Mm-hmm. So when you are a level 1, and that means you're in your first about 5 shifts as a crisis counselor, you are only allowed to take 1 conversation at a time. That's a hard and fast rule. You're not able to take more than 1 as you're a new crisis counselor. Once you get more comfortable, you can decide on your own But if there's any situation where you have an imminent risk texter, where you've done that ladder up risk assessment, you know this texter is at imminent risk and you really need to focus on that conversation, that is your one conversation you focus on. Transfer any conversations you have away. Yes?
So this isn't a typical startup where you're gonna make money, so clearly a lot of time is invested. So how is this funded?
Yes, great question. The question was, how are we funded? Mostly through private donations. So Melinda Gates Foundation, Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, Omidyar Network, which is the PayPal founders' philanthropic organization. Those are some of our biggest funders. And we also have some revenue from the corporate partnerships that we have. So Facebook, for example, when we partner with them, they're a massive social network, and the volume that they're going to bring to us, they need to offset that cost. So the large majority is through private donations.
So there's on our press release area, there is information about how much money was raised initially, and there was a significant amount for funding the nonprofit for a period of time raised up front, which is really what you would need to do in order to be able to secure and go forward and do the type of quality technology that we're providing behind the service.
Yes.
So students often want to help each other. Can someone refer their friend's phone number if they're in trouble, or does that have to originate from the person who is in crisis?
So the question was, can a student send us a person's number to reach out to? No, they could tell their friend, please text this number. We don't do any active outreach because we don't know the situation that that person's in. People ask us also, do we follow up with texters? We don't. After they text stop, after they opt out, we do not text them. It could be triggering. They could be in a dangerous situation. But we only text with people who opt into the service.
I do want to say something about that too, though, because obviously in a domestic violence situation that can be tragic if we were to, alert someone in the household that someone contacted us. In addition to that, there's no identifying information on the main 4 carriers, Sprint,
Yes.
AT&T, etc. There's no identifying information that says someone has been texting a hotline or any type of that. And in the beginning of the launch of the company, our CEO was to meet with some helpful people in that industry that allowed them to also waive the fees that would normally be charged for most of the carriers, so that there's no cost for most of the texters to be texting into us, which was a huge coup at that time because that was not being done.
Does that code appear on your phone bill, though?
It does not appear on your phone bill. It's deleted from your phone bill. Yes?
The 34 hours of training, is that on your time schedule, or is it on a...
So, yeah, but some of it is. So it's sort of a revolving scenario. So let's say that we're doing the module on suicide ideation. And it's being offered in terms of video training, which means they're live and we're live at the same time, at 2 o'clock on Tuesday, 8 o'clock on Wednesday, and Thursday at 10 a.m. Okay, so one of those 3 you gotta hit, right? So that sort of thing. But in between that, you do between an hour and a half of additional work that is offline but part of the training process, and that needs to be completed before you move on to the next module.
And I will also say, I think Pamela is one of our veteran crisis counselors because she's been around for over 2 years, and the training has changed over that time. And so I really will say it's probably only 2 to 3 hours of that is a set time where you need to do an observation with your trainer, you need to do a role play with your trainer, and the rest is actually completely on your own. Okay. So the video modules, the quizzes, it's on your own besides certain hours. So you have 6 weeks to complete 34 hours on your own time.
And as far as volunteering opportunities, this is such an amazing flexible. She mentioned that you can do 4 hours every week at the same time. You can do 2 2-hour sessions at your leisure. You can come in and schedule what you're doing. You can do this when you're on vacation. I'm going to Spain next week. I'm taking my laptop and I'm going to do my 2-hour shift because it's just as long as you have the internet connection. And it's also flexible in terms of the training aspect, and it's just been this very accommodating way. And I know for many of you are probably volunteers as well. sometimes it's not that accommodating to be a volunteer. It's a little bit difficult, right? This is an incredibly supportive environment, and there's a lot of flexibility built in.
Yes.
Is it possible to do more than 4 hours a week?
Yes. The question was, as a volunteer, is it possible to do more than 4 hours a week on our platform, crisis counseling? Yes. We ask for a limit of 12 hours because we don't want burnout. It can be unhealthy to be on the platform for longer than that. Yes.
And to that point too, we have a neat phenomenon because we can leverage the technology we have spike teams, which means that if you want to sign up to be on the spike team, that says that, there was this incident that happened, an active shooting scenario in this community, and we're getting you can jump on for an hour and help us work the queue down to a manageable
Yeah.
amount. That's how we keep our quality control. So there's ways that you can offer yourself up kind of on call as
Yeah.
volunteers.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Yes.
On average, how long do conversations last? And if a conversation is less like past your like set time period,
Yeah.
how does that work?
Good question.
Yeah.
What?
Go ahead.
Okay. How long does a conversation last is the question, and that's really good. So about that machine learning and that data, the most successful conversations we have run between an hour and 15 minutes, start to finish. I know it's more efficient than what you think, right? That doesn't mean that some are really taken care of in 30 minutes. It might be someone who wants to vent about their best friend who did them wrong, and then we're done. And but others do last. They can last 2 hours. I think beyond that, we have what is called cycling or circling, where they're coming back and we're not kind of moving them very protected, but we have techniques to try to bring them to a safety plan, which means we then focus on the present, the very most present, very most current issue that's going on with them, because it could be multiple, and try to develop a safety plan for that scenario for the next 24 hours. But we have found through our data that an hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah, and that's really our goal. We don't want to go much past that. And if that sounds long, the asynchronous nature of text with, as Pamela mentioned, minutes going by in between each message, it takes a little bit longer than it would be on the phone. And what you mentioned about if your shift's over and if you need to go for whatever reason, you can transfer a conversation seamlessly, and another crisis counselor will pick it up.
When you're transferring the conversation, though, do you like deal with this person like summarizing it? 'Cause, like if you've been talking to someone for an hour and you have to go.
Yes, the question was, how do you summarize the transfer of a conversation? So there's both a little form that you fill out as the crisis counselor transferring it, and the next crisis counselor can see the transcript of the conversation, so they know what's been going on. I see a hand back there.
A couple questions. So do you prefer, once we sign up, say 4 hours, 6 hours a week, the same time, or sometimes could it change?
So the question was, as a volunteer, can your shifts change? We ask that you sign up for a semi-regular shift, but absolutely we have certain crisis counselors who their schedule's all over the board. That is totally fine. We simply ask for at least 4 hours.
And then earlier, it says that I guess the busiest time is from 8 p.m. to
Yes.
4 a.m.
So the busiest time is then, which is actually why, that's actually why we love Bay Area crisis counselors, because, and West Coast crisis counselors, even like Hawaii, Alaska, right? So we always peak at night, and East Coast crisis counselors are going to sleep. So it's really helpful to have people in Pacific time zone.
But you do need people 7/24, right?
We absolutely have crisis counselors 24/7, and yes, there are people volunteering from I have a friend who volunteers from 1 a.m. to 5 p.m. and she works a 9 to 5 job. I don't know how, but she does it every Wednesday night. It's a really kind of tight-knit community because there are fewer crisis counselors on at that time, and they feel extremely impactful and productive.
We also have crisis counselors who are working from London, from Germany. So those are very helpful. Not a lot, but some, so that's one way.
Yeah.
Interesting enough, a lot of the college students work Friday night shifts, which I would think I do. So they're either very dedicated or it's just a time block that they do before they go out, that sort of thing. They do their volunteering. So it's interesting to know what people are. My husband does he does a Sunday night shift and a Tuesday night shift. After our kids go to bed, which would be killer for me. I'll either do a very, very early morning one or I'll do my regular daytime one. But
I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions. Right now, Crisis Text Line is only available in English. We're actively working on Spanish right now and other languages.
I hope every text went well, go well, but I mean, sometimes I can imagine they don't. What are the consequences besides the person?
Yeah, you know what? We are a crisis counseling service, so the people that we're dealing with are extremely high risk. We also don't always know the result of the conversations, right? If we call emergency services, we ask the police department to follow up and let us know what happened. But actually, our point of care is handed off at that point, and they don't always follow up with us. And so in our minds, if one life is saved, that's pretty darn important. And we know our service has helped more than that. Yes?
So in general, how do you know when a conversation is over? It can be a couple minutes before that next comes in. So if your limit is 2 based on your seniority experience, how do you know when you can sign off of one and bring another one in?
Yeah, and that's definitely, so how do you know when a conversation is over and you're ready to wrap up? And as a new crisis counselor, that was a little bit difficult for me to do and set those boundaries, but there really is an arc of a conversation. Once you've given them enough space to explore the problem, you ask them, okay, in the past when you felt overwhelmed, how have you calmed down or how have you handled this? And then you're really moving to more of like a problem-solving stage. I'd love to give you a couple websites before we end our conversation. Even saying that can kind of signify to them maybe after 45 minutes, an hour, that it's time to wrap up. I don't know if you have any other techniques.
We've been texting for a while now, and you just mentioned that how excited you were about moving on to this new thing. I want to check in with you. How are you feeling now that we've chatted for this amount of time? There's ways that you do it. You don't ever want to make them feel that it's we're done here, and it's kind of a skill that is trained into you. As she said, sometimes it's texting. Sometimes texters do disappear in the middle of a conversation, and that's part of the process. So we try to always let them know they can text back when they're in a crisis and provide them our number again.
All right, very last question because we are running over.
Oh, do you have statistics? How many of your clients, visitors are single time versus using you as a resource 1 or 2 times versus you're the chronic friend?
Yes, so the question was, what are the statistics on repeat texters? About 1/3 of our texters are repeat texters, and about 6% are chronic texters who have texted in more than 20 times. They have management plans. Supervisors actually deal with those conversations because they are better equipped to set boundaries.
Yeah, we are not meant to be, and we should have said this too, that we are not therapists, we are not psychologists, we do not give advice. So they are there to help.
And we do not diagnose.
We do not diagnose.
Yeah.
So we're, interestingly enough, many who text in are already under the care of a therapist, and it's a matter of them not being able to make it to that next meeting without needing to talk to someone. Or they have been in therapy before and they didn't have a good experience and they're trying to figure out what to do next. And but the goal is for them to empower them to reach out to their previous therapist or and get that type of actual help that they need when they take that step. So.
All right, thank you guys so much. So many questions. You're so engaged.